Hello, this is Scott. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I cover a variety of different data science and analytics topics. Today I'm going to talk about the integration between Statistica and Spotfire. The idea is I'm going to use Spotfire as an interface into Statistica. The reason I'm doing that is Spotfire is an interface, it's a visual interface, it's very user-friendly, a lot of people are comfortable with it. Sometimes people are a little intimidated by AI, machine learning, and data science. So what we do is, with the integration between these two products, a user can be using a powerful workflow within Statistica, but drive it from the Spotfire interface, and that's what we're going to do. So we're going to build a very simple workflow, but you can imagine this workflow could be quite extensive. So let's do that real quick. A very simple data set, 4 columns, 10 rows, and I'm going to create a workspace. So File, and then New Workspace. All right, I'm going to use a blank template, and I'm going to drop that data inside here. That data is called Statistica Input Data. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to connect a node to that. Let's imagine that we're going to do something like machine learning. The first thing that we typically do is we define a partition of our data, right? We want a holdout set. So one way I can do that is I can create a variable here. I'm just going to create 2 data sets, and I'm just going to, for simplicity, make them 50-50. And machine learning, these would probably be 70-30 or something like that between the training set and the testing set. I'll even rename this column Train Test. And so what this is going to do is, if you look at this data behind it, this was the source data. Now if I run this node, if I look at the output, it's just added a column at the end, and it's going to try to match my 50-50 between test and train. That way, when I want to create the partition and I do a flow, then I can flow by that column, right? It's categorical column, train test, I execute that, and then what I get is I get 2 subsets of data. I'm going to use my training set to generate a lot of different models, and then I'll use the test set to validate, choose my champion model from that typical machine learning type process. All right, so the other thing that I'm going to do to simplify things is I'm going to, on this node right here, I'm going to call this an input node in Statistica, and then this train node, I'm just going to call it an output node. And when we look at the output here, turns out that I just pulled out in 3 records here, and then I pulled the 7 records there. So it tries to match the best it can, very small data set. The idea is we're only going to be using these 2 nodes in this workflow. Let me just save this off real quick. I'm going to save this as temp. So now I've got a file called temp. It's this very simple workflow. So I'm going to go back to Spotfire, and let's just get a data set from an Excel file, this small data set. This has the same structure as our source data set in Statistica. It's named something different. In Statistica, it's called Statistica Input Data, and then in Spotfire, it was called, in fact, let's just look at it, visualization, add visualization table, and then boom, this is our small data. All right, so the idea is that a user can use that powerful flow just by changing new data in here, creating a new source, dropping a new table in, etc., and having it hook up and execute against this workflow right here. Okay, so how do I do that? Well, within Spotfire, I go up to Tools, and then I use the Statistica extension, this data function, and I'm going to add one, and I'm going to add it just from a local file on my hard drive, and that was that temp data that we just created. It's going to go out there, it's going to look at it, it's going to find that flow, and then it's going to look at the inputs. If I had parameters, it would drop those here, but I don't have any parameters that we're going to use right now. And then the output, and then this is that output, that subset, In fact, there's only one, train, that we're interested in, right? Remember the little red dots. Here's my first red dot. It's the input data. The output is the red dot. It's the training data. So I'm done with that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to change the source. So the input data right now going into that flow, remember, it is Statistica input data. We saw it in the workspace, right? There it is right there. All right. And then what we're going to do is we're going to change that input data. We're going to go in and we're going to say, let's make it a columns, and there's a data table available in Spotfire. It's called small data. We're looking at it in the background, and I'm going to make, excuse me, that my input. And I'm just going to select my variables, and then I'm going to click OK. So these are the 4 variables. Now those are going to be the input for the workspace. And I'm going to say refresh function automatically. In other words, anytime there's a change, it's going to update. And then for the output, I could say a data table. And remember, that's my training set, right? So now, let's look at the output. Let's create a new page with the output. That was my input, and then here is my output. I'm going to create a table. This time I'm going to change the data source, and it will be that train set, remember? All right, so I had training. I had 3 rows there, and I have red, blue, red. All right, so what happens if I were to change one of these blues? Let's say this is orange. There were no oranges in my data previously. Oops. Nice little function. I say Spotfire knows that I'm changing this, and it says all occurrence in columns, so it's going to change every blue to orange if I want it to. So now what happens to my output? I got an orange. That's how easy it is to hook up a source table to a Statistica data function, change the source data in Spotfire. The user doesn't need to know anything about Statistica at all. They think that they are just using Spotfire as it is. Once a data scientist or citizen data scientist sets up this Statistica node for them, then the user can come along and just use it at will. So again, in support of the citizen data scientist, it's a nice little thing to have. I'll stop there, and I'm going to do a series of these little short snippets of functionality within this data function. Hope you can join me next time. Thanks.